My name is Brian Leib. I'm the Executive Director of the Iranian Americans for Liberty. On behalf of our Board of Directors, it is my honor to welcome all of you to this evening's virtual Congressional Meet and Greet with Congressman Mo Brooks from Alabama. This evening's event is our 11th virtual Congressional Meet and Greet of 2021, and we're very excited to have the Congressman with us this evening. Before we get started, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about our organization and what we do. The Iranian Americans for Liberty, also known as IAL, we're a bipartisan group of Iranian Americans from all around the nation that are working together to support and strengthen U.S. foreign policy and national security solutions that bring democracy, human rights accountability, and freedom of speech to Iranians that are living under the oppressive Islamic Republic of Iran. Please visit our website at www.iranianamericansforliberty.org to learn a little bit more about our organization and to get involved with what we're doing. I should also note that please be advised tonight's event is for educational purposes only. And with all of our events with members of Congress, our events are open to the public. They're free to attend. The only thing that is required is for you to register to join the event. So at this time, it is my pleasure to hand the program over to this evening's moderator, Adele Nazarian. Adele, the floor is yours. Have a great conversation with the Congressman.
Thank you so much, Brian. And welcome everyone to this evening's Congressional Meet and Greet, our 11th, with Congressman Mo Brooks. I apologize in advance, getting over a little bit of laryngitis. But my name, for any of you who are not familiar with me, is Adele Nazarian, and I will be the moderator for this evening's conversation. Before we get started, I wanted to, with our Q&A, I wanted to do a little bit of background for you, read a little bit about our special guest this evening. The Alabama public has voted to elect Congressman Mo Brooks to public office 14 times. As such, Mo has successfully helped carry the GOP banner in general elections more than any other current Alabama office holder. The public has elected him 5 times as a state legislator, 4 times as a Madison County commissioner, and 5 times as a U.S. congressman. The congressman serves on 2 influential House committees, the Armed Services and Science, Space, and Technology committees. Congressman Brooks also serves on 3 important House subcommittees, namely the Strategic Forces and Readiness Subcommittees on Armed Services and the Space Subcommittee on Science, Space, and Technology. Very, very cool. Mo and his wife, Martha, are the proud parents of 4 children and grandparents of 10 grandchildren. Beautiful. Congressman Brooks, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We would like to turn it over to you now for some brief opening remarks before we start with our questions and answers.
Well, thank you. It's a wonderful opportunity to be here with you this evening. I want to caution everybody, we're in the middle of votes in the United States Capitol, so at any moment in time, I may have to depart for about a minute or so to cast a vote, and then I'll be right back. I also am willing to do questions after the ones that you have sent me in advance, in case you want to do something impromptu, at least up until such point of time as this Zoom meeting concludes, or I have to leave because of whatever Speaker Nancy Pelosi does or says next. She's pretty much the one who controls my schedule in the United States Capitol complex. So with that, let's go to it.
Thank you so much, Congressman Brooks. And first question is, you have been a strong voice and leader on the issues of national security. As a freshman congressman in 2011, you founded the Army Aviation Caucus. Why do you think it's critical that the United States of America has the strongest military in the world?
Well, you've seen what happens when America is not a strong leader worldwide. World War I broke out. Millions of people lost their lives. World War II broke out. Over 50 million people lost their lives because of Japanese aggression, Italian aggression, and Nazi Germany aggression. Since World War II, in large part because of the strength of the United States of America, we have not had major conflicts break out. So if the United States of America becomes weaker, that is going to encourage aggressor nations such as China, Russia, perhaps Iran, perhaps various nations in the Middle East, perhaps elsewhere, to engage in military adventurism in order to expand their borders and impose their form of government and beliefs on others who, at least at this point, are hesitant to submit themselves to that kind of boot.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your answer. Absolutely agree. History is the best barometer for this. So for our next question, we're going to dive a little bit into your committee assignments. You are on the House Committee on Armed Services and Science, Space, and Technology. Can you please tell our audience a little bit more about the role of these committees?
The House Armed Services Committee is responsible for all of the programs implemented by the Department of Defense. We create them, we kill them. If there's a weapon system, by way of example, that is out of date or is proven to be too costly or just doesn't work, it's the House Armed Services Committee that by and large removes those kinds of things from our authorized programs. Now, we don't spend all the money on national defense. What we do is authorize programs, and then the appropriators are the ones that decide how much money goes into the funding of each of those programs that we have created. That's on the armed services side. On the science, space, and technology side, we have a broad range of things that we're involved with. I'll touch on just 2 or 3 of them very briefly. NASA space program, well, that's the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. We're the ones that authorize all the things that NASA does. National Science Foundation and the research that they do, well, that's governed, administered to a large degree by the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. A lot of our health research goes through Science, Space, and Technology Committee. So that kind of gives you an idea of what we do on SST and also on armed services.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So for our next question, we'd like to discuss the Defund the Police movements, which we've been hearing a lot about more recently. What do you think about this movement? And do you stand with our men and women in law enforcement who really risk their lives every day to protect us?
Well, if you like being a victim of crime or you like perpetrating crimes, then you'll love the Defund the Police movement. Defund the Police is a soft on crime approach where you try to reason with people not to go kill and rape other people. Well, I would suggest that those type of people are not likely to be subject to reason. So you're going to see a lot more deaths, and you're already seeing that in some of our major cities. You're going to see a lot more rioting. You're going to see a lot more vandalism. You're going to see a lot more burglaries. You're going to see a lot more assaults. And that's fine for the criminal element because that's what they like to do. But those of us who are law-abiding citizens, we would prefer not to be subjected to those criminal activities. And probably the most glaring example we're seeing right now is all this video coming out of California in particular, but it's also in other communities that are soft on crime, San Francisco, Los Angeles, where they have weakened their theft laws so much that you are seeing people brazenly break into stores, steal whatever they want, walk or run out, and nothing is done to them. In that instance, crime does pay. And a lot of citizens may think that this does not adversely affect their lives. Well, they're very soon about to find out otherwise when they have to drive 5, 10, 15, 20 miles to find an open grocery store or an open pharmaceutical establishment, a drugstore, or to buy clothes or to buy shoes, because stores cannot stay in business if large amounts of their inventory are brazenly stolen by criminals. And I'll suggest for a moment one of the major contributors to this. There are a lot of people who are soft on crime and say, oh, well, let's give criminals voting rights. And they're doing that because they want to win elections. This is particularly true of Democrats because their data reveals that criminals are much more likely to vote for Democrats than Republicans because Republicans are more likely to be law and order. So when you start having these large block votes of criminals and their families, what do you think they demand? They demand a softer approach on crime so that they can commit more crime and get away with it. So there is a cause and effect, and a lot of these city councils and mayors have now become hostage to those block votes of criminals who want to be allowed to commit more crime. And that's what you're going to get until such time as law-abiding citizens, those who want to be able to protect their families, wake up and start voting accordingly.
Absolutely. I believe it was during the 2016 primary that Bernie Sanders, actually, the Vermont senator, had made this a central issue of his campaign. I think giving criminals the right to vote. So you're very spot on in your assessment. We agree with you, Congressman.
If you don't mind, let me depart for about a minute, no more
Sure.
than a minute, because I need to make sure that I have cast a vote on a bill whose voting time is about to expire.
That vote. Thank you. So everyone, to anyone who is here, we're waiting for Congressman Mo Brooks. He is literally voting right now live on the floor, on the House floor. Very exciting. I don't know if anyone here has actually had the opportunity to visit our nation's capital, but getting a tour of the Capitol Rotunda is really exciting. It's beautiful. I suggest everyone does it once in their lives. Everyone who's here on this call, for sure, you're all engaged, you're all active, and here he is, he's back. So.
All right, I'm fine on this vote. We'll have another vote called probably within the next 5 minutes or so. And I've got about a 15-minute period of time in which to go vote on that one. So next question.
Awesome, I love it. So we agree with you. Supporting law enforcement is non-negotiable. We're really thankful to you for being so outspoken on law enforcement.
Well, I used to be a prosecutor in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and I was the district attorney of Madison County, which has Huntsville, Alabama. And when you're running the grand jury and you are taking up a full week listening to dozens or hundreds of crimes being described to you and the people who perpetrated them and the heinous nature of some of these things, you know, someone's got to have sympathy for the crime victim. Right now, we don't have enough elected officials who have that kind of sympathy for the crime victim. And that's most unfortunate.
Shocking, isn't it? Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to talk to you briefly now about our Second Amendment. You have a strong record of supporting the Second Amendment. Can you please tell our audience a little bit more about why you support the Second Amendment and America's rights to keep and bear arms?
The purpose, almost exclusively, but not, I mean, hunting is a part of the Second Amendment. Being able to protect yourselves from criminals is a part of the Second Amendment. But the major function of the Second Amendment, and it's ranked number 2 out of 10 in the United States Constitution, I'll tell you how important it is to be able to protect your republic. The people who wrote the United States Constitution had recently fought a revolutionary war to free themselves of a dictatorial government that was in the United Kingdom, where a king and a parliament controlled our laws. And American citizens, back then they were colonials, they had no control over whatever it is that was dictated to them from the United Kingdom. And the founders of our country were concerned that in America, a dictatorship may arise or a monarchy may arise. And so the founders insisted that citizens be allowed to be armed in order to, by force of arms, reinstall a republic in which the citizens can control the destiny of their country, should that republic be taken from them by whatever means, keeping in mind that they themselves had just sacrificed their lives, their fortune, to make America a new nation.
Yeah, and that actually ties into our next topic, which is the fact that you're right. So many nations don't have that, don't provide their citizens, grant their citizens the right to keep and bear arms, because they are dictatorships and they do not want the people to have the ability to rise up against their dictatorial, stronghold. So we're going to switch over now into foreign policy. The Islamic Republic of Iran, they constantly chant death to America, death to Israel, the great and small Satans, ever since they came into power after the Islamic Revolution of 1979. With the recent sham elections in Iran, and of course in Syria, Ebrahim Raisi will be sworn in as Iran's next president in a few days. He's a hardliner, as we know, that has earned the nickname of the Butcher for his role in, overseeing the execution of thousands, really, of Iranian citizens. What is your message for the next president of Iran, Ibrahim Raisi?
Well, I would hope that they would actually be the republic they say that they are. I would hope that they would have honest and accurate elections. I would hope that they would allow legitimate competition in these elections. And I would hope that long term, they would look at some of the provisions that we have in the Bill of Rights in our Constitution and offer those to the Iranian citizens so that they too can enjoy more liberty and freedom than they're allowed to enjoy now. That's one thing I'd really like to see happen. Now, the chances of it aren't very good, but still, you asked, so I answered as to what I'd like to see happen. On the other hand, I would like to see our government encourage Iranian citizens to pursue liberty and freedom, even to the point of having to fight for it if that's what it takes. Now, that's very difficult in today's age and time. It's not like 1776 through 1783 when we fought for our liberty. The circumstances are much different. The overpowering weaponry of a central government is much different. Back in the late 1700s, you pretty much were limited to cannons and guns. And most anybody, if they had the money, they could have both. And so then it was a pretty even fight. Nowadays, with weapons of mass destruction or heavy armaments like tanks or like airplanes or like ships, a citizenry has a very, very difficult time being able to compete with that should they decide to fight for liberty. So I would hope the world at some point, the free world, those of us who believe in republics, would start encouraging those who are deprived of liberty and freedom to fight, and then also support them with whatever weapons are necessary to even things out, understanding though that ultimately the fight for liberty has to come from within. You've seen what America has done in Afghanistan now for close to 2 decades. We've given the Afghan people the ability to fight for the kinds of liberties that we enjoy in America, but we cannot be the police cop on every corner of the planet. At some point, the citizenry has to decide in sufficient numbers that they want liberty and freedom, and they're going to fight for it. Now, when I use the word fight, I literally am talking about a revolutionary type of environment. Hopefully, though, first what they would do is try to slowly but surely persuade those who have influence over the political leadership of these regimes how it is in everybody's interest, including that leadership, to allow more liberty and freedom. It's in the better interest of that country.
Yeah, as an acquaintance of mine from, I'll tell you, from Egypt said to me about 3 years ago, said, freedom is very expensive. So many different ways.
It is.
Mm-hmm. So as we know here in America, but it's a blessing. And it's a God-given right too. So for our next question, I'd like to focus on the current presidential administration. As you might know, world leaders have been in Vienna for the last 6 weeks, discussing things related to the JCPOA, the nuclear Iran deal, the Iranian regime, and now with Raisi, that's coming into power, has stated that they will under no circumstances entertain any conversations with the Biden administration unless the United States removes all economic sanctions and re-enters the JCPOA with no conditions placed on the Iranian regime. What do you think about the JCPOA? And should we be negotiating with the Iranian regime?
I don't think it ever hurts to have discussions with an adversary. The worst that can happen is you make no advancement. And there's always a chance that with reasonable people involved, you can have advancement or a mutually beneficial relationship. I am very much concerned, though, with this administration and how soft they seem to be, not only on crime, but with respect to our geopolitical foes. You've seen this administration be soft with respect to Iran. You've seen them be soft with respect to communist China. You've seen them be hesitant to support liberty-loving peoples in Cuba. And I don't know where they're going to play out on this. They're only 6 months into the 4-year term. but I'm very much concerned about the direction of the Biden administration with respect to foreign policy generally and with respect to Iran in particular. And probably I'm equally concerned about the diminishing mental capacity of the President of the United States. I've seen Joe Biden over the decades where he's sharp as a tack. And it's pretty clear that with advancing age, he has lost some of his mental acumen. And that is most disconcerting because that suggests to me that our geopolitical foes may see that diminished capacity as a time to be much more adventuresome. And that's never a good thing for the United States of America or for those parts of the world that may be subjected to the adventuresome conduct of a foreign nation. So we'll see how it all plays out. I don't know where the Biden administration is going to end up, but I am very concerned with what appears to be an initial softening with respect to Iran without any quid pro quo, any beneficial return to us or to the liberties and freedoms, hopefully someday to be enjoyed by the Iranian people.
Absolutely. I wanted to actually do a little bit of a diversion. It was interesting. It was Article 25, is that what it is? Where they kept invoking it under the previous administration to try to remove President Trump for not being.
Well, it would be the 25th Amendment, I think, but I'm
right?
not sure that it'd be an amendment. I'm not sure if 25 is the number right offhand. It's in the 20s someplace,
Yeah.
mid-20s or higher. And the fake news media would push that agenda item on a regular basis because that's what their masters, the Democratic Party, wanted. And it's odd now that we have, that's a good observation, now that we have someone who is clearly suffering from reduced mental capacity, that you don't hear that from socialist Democrats in Congress, and you don't hear that from their allies and partners in evil, the fake news media.
Yeah, thank you. Well, let's get back on with the Iranian regime, and thank you for answering that as well, the question that I asked. It's widely known that the Islamic Republic of Iran funds terrorism all around the world. In recent years, the regime provided material and financial support to Hamas in Israel, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Houthi rebels in Yemen. What can Congress continue to do to freeze the regime's finances that fuel terrorism around the world?
We can keep the economic pressure on. Now, we don't have as much economic wherewithal as we did under the Trump administration. We lost a lot of it, quite frankly, before the Trump administration with Barack Obama doing what he did. Nonetheless, we can do our best with now limited resources and abilities to put financial pressure on. But none of that's going to happen unless you can get the Biden administration to wake up and be aggressive in that respect. And as I mentioned earlier, so far, they've taken a soft approach. I don't know of them having been aggressive with anybody. And that's most disconcerting because that's a signal to aggressors around the world to be aggressive because the United States won't do what's necessary to stop it.
Thank you. Well, as we discussed, the Islamic Republic of Iran regime, it spends billions of dollars financing and funding terrorism all around the world. It's an issue that most Iranians, everyday Iranians, do not support. They would rather see these billions of dollars, frankly, spent on infrastructure, roads, and schools. And currently, there are Iranians protesting all over Iran over water shortages, in fact. Started out in the southwest of Iran, the Khuzestan region, and it started taking place and spreading throughout cities all over Iran. You know, these water shortages are due largely to the corruption of the Iranian regime and their desire to spend billions funding terrorists instead of taking care of things at home with their own people. You know, what is your message, if I may ask, to the people of Iran who might be listening, which many of them are, to this event? Do you stand with the Iranian people in their quest for freedom from this regime in Iran?
Please do everything you can within reason, within your abilities, understanding that you do want to keep yourself and your family as safe as you can, but do everything you can to try to persuade the leaders of the Iranian regime to do the proper thing for the citizens of Iran. Try to encourage your friends and neighbors and other family members to concur. I'm not going to state the kinds of specifics that you might want to do because you know better than I do what you're permitted to do in Iran without risking the life of yourself or your loved one or your children. God bless as you try to make a reasonable decision under very difficult circumstances, but it's your call. Understanding, as we mentioned earlier, that freedom is not free. And it's unfortunate that's been the case throughout history, but freedom is not free, and often the price is in blood.
Thank you so much. Well, you have a few minutes left. Are you okay on time?
I do.
Okay, great. I was just gonna make a quick comment. It's so funny, the infrastructure issue with Iran with the water shortages reminds me so very much of the drought under Jerry Brown when he was governor of California, how they literally chose to put California smelt over the people in California. So very similar, you see all these parallels, right? Which we also alluded to earlier.
Are you in California now?
No, I was for 10 years. I'm in Washington, D.C. currently, but
I'm sorry to hear that. That's worse than California.
this is where everything happens, right? So that's, yeah.
Well, I have never seen a city in the United States of America that is as trashy as Washington, D.C. I often ride my bike, and I swear if I go 3 or 4 or 5 miles, not in the mall area, but where people actually live, I'll have to dodge thousands of shards of glass, either on the roadways or on the sidewalks, or both. And I've never been in a place where people were just so trashy and had so little respect for their own neighborhoods. And I'll give you an example. Often when you go by, say, cars that are parked, there'll be hundreds, if not thousands, of shards of glass just from that one car where someone has broken in a windshield or one of the side windows. You know how the safety glass is nowadays. It breaks into these little cubes, still sharp, still can injure people, and they'll be sprinkled all over the road where that car has been parked and then victimized by some kind of burglar. So good luck in Washington. I'd try to move someplace else if I were you, but it's your call. I would never live here, not ever. There are much better places spread throughout the United States of America where you have better schools, you have lower cost of living, you have friendlier people, and you have fewer criminals.
Ready for this? I'm originally from New Jersey.
Okay, well, most parts of New Jersey are far superior to Washington, D.C.
No, they are.
I mean, don't get me wrong, the federal complex along the mall is spectacular. It is a great place to visit. But gosh, when you get into the residential areas more than, say, a half mile or a mile from the mall, where we have a heavy Capitol Police presence, it is dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. We'll have to take a trip down to Alabama for sure and see it, because from what I hear from friends, it's a beautiful state. And so
we have far better beaches than y'all could ever hope of having in New Jersey. Okay.
Yeah.
Along the Gulf Coast, the Emerald Coast, the Panhandle of Florida, Gulf Shores, Orange Beach, Dauphin Island. The sand is beautiful and the water is crystal clear and it's warm. So you might want to start there, and as you work your way north, end up in Huntsville. We're the birthplace of America's space program, highly, highly, highly educated, more engineers per capita than any place else in the United States of America, scientists and physicists all over the place. We literally are the birthplace of America's space program with the Marshall Space Flight Center. And then we also have a number of military commands on Redstone Arsenal, where NASA is headquartered. And by way of example, everything that the United States Army purchases goes through our community. All those gee whiz bang weapons that you see, they're either invented in our community or their invention and manufacture is contracted out of our community. So everywhere between those two extremes is wonderful. And the two anchors on the south and on the north are spectacular.
I'm very much looking forward to it. I will say this, New Jersey, we got the pizza, and Chris Christie, I'll take the pizza. Well,
we have good pizza too, but the Dreamland ribs is, if you're going to come to Alabama and you can go to Dreamland and you like ribs, they're great.
I love ribs. So we're going to ask thank you so much for that. That was awesome. And one final question for you, if you don't mind. indulging the audience, we'd love to know, as you know, if you were to go to dinner with any two deceased individuals, who would they be and where would that dinner take place?
Well, the place would be easy. It would be at my house where we could have a private conversation, but I'm not going to limit it to two. I'm going to have a little bit more than two. And even with the five that I'm thinking of, there are a lot more, but I'd start with Jesus and Muhammad as religious leaders. I would include George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and Ronald Reagan, in my judgment, three of the greatest presidents in the history of the United States of America.
I have the chills. That would be such an incredible gathering. I mean,
I'm sure it would.
wow. How many of
Just to have George Washington, Abraham Lincoln see where we are today, that would provoke an amazing discussion with the technological advances on the one hand, but the decline in moral values and responsibilities of citizenship on the other hand. And then let's go ahead and dip our foot into religion. The kind of discussion I would expect we could hear between Jesus and Muhammad would also be quite enlightening and invigorating.
Yes, that was a very politically correct answer. I love it. Thank you. Well, I would now love to invite you to please provide some closing remarks, if you would, to the audience. Anything you'd like to add?
Sure. Folks, for 75 years, by any measurable standard, the United States of America has been the greatest nation in world history. We've had the highest gross domestic product, that's economic output, both total and per capita. Now, what is wealth? Wealth is something that people can use. It's a form of power. It enables you to do things that you otherwise cannot do, like take care of your families. If you have a healthcare issue, put a roof over your head, put food on the table, clothes, transportation. America's provided that. We have an ability to control our own destiny. So long as we have honest and accurate elections, we the people get control what America is going to do in the future. We have liberties and freedoms that are by and large the envy of the world. People are breaking into our country to try to take advantage of what we have to offer. All of those things, unfortunately, are under threat. I've never had such fear for the future of my country. This is your country too. Please join in the fight for liberty and freedom. Examine the Constitution, think about and figure out what are the foundational principles that have combined to make us the greatest nation in world history. It wasn't blind luck. There were certain principles that were established that set us apart on a path different from the other nations around the globe. And then once you figure out what those foundational principles are that have enabled us to be who we are as a people, get in the fight and protect them. Support candidates that share those values financially or with your time. And if you can't find in your neck of the woods candidates at the city, county, state, and federal level who will do what is necessary to continue to make America the greatest nation in world history, then by golly, sign up yourself and be a candidate. You may even win.
I love it. You know, thank you so much. You know, the U.S. Constitution truly is an exceptional document. You're absolutely right. And everything this nation stands for. So thank you again, Congressman Mo Brooks, for an incredible interview and meet and greet. The Iranian Americans for Liberty thanks you and everyone for joining us this evening. Our next virtual event will be held on August 12th with Congresswoman Stephanie Bice, who is the first Iranian American ever elected to the United States Congress. We will also be hosting Congressman Chip Roy on August 23rd. Please do visit www.iranian-americans-for-liberty.org to register for these events. And until next time, I'm Adele Nazarian. Thank you again, Congressman Mo Brooks. Have a wonderful evening.
God bless. Peace be with you.